So my name is Monica Huntsberry. I have the honor of being a host and advisor for Rebel 11. I want to first tell you a little bit about our special guest today, Dr. Maddalena Bearzi. Maddalena happens to be a friend of mine as well, so special bonus for me to be in conversation with her today and all of you. Maddalena is president and co-founder of Ocean Conservation Society. She has a PhD in biology and a postdoctorate from UCLA, and she has been involved in studying marine mammals with a conservation bias since 1990. Maddalena, I think it's accurate for me to say you were the first person to study dolphin and whales off the coast of Southern California. Is that correct?
There were other researchers, but not exactly in the Los Angeles area. So I guess I was the first one to conduct a really long-term study in this area.
Yes, you've been researching. You're one of the longest researchers in the area and founder of so much great work on the study of ocean wildlife. And we're here today to talk about Maddalena's book, and I have a copy here. It's called Stranded: Finding Nature in Uncertain Times. And while Maddalena is a lover of all things nature, I also just want to say that she is a beautiful writer. And one of the things, Maddalena, I just want to share that I appreciated so much about your book, well, there were many, is, the visual journey you took us through. And here you were talking about stranded, this period of confinement during the pandemic and your views and images and reflections.
Right.
But it was such an opening to nature and beauty and the ocean and memory. And I just love the visual journey you took us on. And I will share a couple little excerpts today as we're talking, but it's a beautiful reflection. And the other thing that I just love, and I have to show everybody here at the beginning, is Maddalena is also an artist. In addition to making jewelry, she draws, and she did all of the images on each of the chapters. That's so pretty. I love that. So Maddalena, congratulations on the new release of Stranded: Finding Nature in Uncertain Times. Tell us about the genesis of this book. Let's start there.
So when the pandemic arrived, I went to study those magnificent animals that you just mentioned, dolphins and whales and sea lions and seal out of the water, to be stuck at home, like pretty much everyone else on Earth. So it was a big change for me. And not that I had any right to complain. I was living at home with my lovely husband, my big dog, I have a backyard and everything. But I really felt stranded. And then a little bit at the time, I start to adapt, because that's what we do, right? We are like other non-human animals. When things get strange, we tend to adapt. So I started to rediscover what was around me. And I went back to that curiosity that I had when I was a child, because when I grew up in Italy, I was always looking at the animals in my parents' backyard, in the hills nearby. I grew up in cities, so except during the summertime, when I had the chance to go to this beautiful place in Sardinia and explore the creature of the sands and be on the water, I grew up in cities. So my nature was around the one around my backyard, on the hills nearby. So during the pandemic, I wasn't able to go out on the water because, especially at the beginning, because of social distancing. So I started walking my neighborhood and looking at what was in my yard, and I rediscovered nature, the nature around me. And I rediscovered the beauty of nature. And I think the idea of writing this book came from sharing these experiences that I had in nature and the beauty of nature, and how we need to protect nature.
I love that. And, I will tell you that, as I was reading this book, it really started to cause an awareness to me of things that we take for granted. You talk about, the squirrels running around your backyard or the birds chirping, and just like, we just hear it like it's normal, right? But taking a moment to stop and acknowledge that it's beauty, and that we're in interaction and interconnectedness with nature and the power of that. One of the other things I really like is how well we got to know Genghis, your dog, in the book, and all the journeys you took and your observations about him, somebody who had been in your life for a long time, but how they even started to become more attuned and shift during nature. And I think, or during the pandemic. And I think a lot of us are dog lovers. So I'd love for you to share some highlights about your bonding and observations of Genghis during this time.
So yes, I have a big mat. His name was Genghis. So we name him that way because it's a lab Great Dane. So we name him Genghis because we'll be as fearless as the emperor of the oh my God, I can't think about the word. Anyway,
It's okay.
Genghis Khan, and as big as a Great Dane. Instead, is a clumsy mat that gets scared if a fly goes by. So Genghis was my companion, my sidekick during this adventure in nature. And I didn't only discover new things about him that I didn't notice before. My dog is almost 10 years old now. And by working with him, it was not just fun to discover the animals around my neighborhood, but also to discover things about Genghis. For instance, during the pandemic, I was getting out of the house and I put my muzzle on, my mask and his leash. And after a while, I realized that Genghis couldn't see my face at all. And I was talking to him, but we always think, dogs look at our face to get clues of what's going on around them and how we talk and so on. So I was curious about how my dog react from not seeing my face or not seeing other people's faces. And so I started to do my opportunistic experiment with him. And at the same time, a friend of mine that is a biologist in Colorado did the same thing. And he actually went a step further, interview all these people and ask them what kind of reaction their dog had versus people. And we discovered that actually dogs don't seem to care much if we wear mask or not. Probably our face is just part of our face is the facial emoticon, is part of this cocktail of things that dogs pick up on when we go out with them. And it probably just boiled down to different personalities. For my dog that is very clumsy, doesn't care about anything, and still behave like a little puppy, having a mask or not didn't make any difference at all.
I think that's great how you were conducting these micro experiments to see what you could learn about animals and nature during the pandemic. One of the things I want to read here, because I think one of the things that I learned in the book is how accessible you make it for us to conduct our own everyday observations, and that we don't have to be a scientist to learn about nature. And it says, here's a quote from you. "That's how my brain works at sea. It starts with 3 simple and inexpensive ingredients: curiosity about nature, observation or the power of seeing or taking notice of something, and perhaps most importantly, an open mind." Tell us about the power of an open mind from your perspective and experience.
That's exactly right. That's when I started when I was a kid. I was just curious about everything I saw around me, and the curiosity was the first thing I was curious about. The dog that I had at that time, all the lizards in my backyard. And especially children have these open minds, and over time, even studying dolphins, I realized that I was so accustomed to do my research and go out of the water that I almost got it for granted what I was doing. And with the pandemic, and I started discovering the lizard in my backyard, the opossum, the squirrels, the birds, I reopen my mind in a way, and I think it's so important. And in the book, I really make a point to say, you know, I have a PhD and I have a postdoc, but you don't need to be a scientist. You don't need to have any of this to not only to appreciate nature, but also to understand nature. And I think by observing nature, by observing what's around us, we can be more empathetic human beings. We can care more about what's around us. And by caring what's around us and better understanding what's around us, we have a better chance to protect what we see. And this book is really a call for everyone to open their eyes. And we all have this nature around. You know, I live in LA, it's a city. And if I can see all these things in my neighborhood, it's like in the city, everybody can see things as well.
I love that, because this isn't just a book about the pandemic. It's a book about, you know, the learnings that you had during that window that translates into so many facets of our life and toward our future. One of the things that you spoke about, your parents are in Italy. You had a plane ticket to go to Italy in hand when the pandemic hit, and you were getting calls from your mom saying, "Don't come, it's chaos here." And, you know, just how quickly things shifted overnight. And you know, that sense of grief you felt not being able to go visit your family, and realizing that the freedom you had always enjoyed to just get on a plane, you know, when time and expenses permitted, right? Right, was no longer there. But yet you found a different way to feel connected to your family, and in particular, your mother, through your gardening. You want to tell us a little bit about that?
Sure. Yes, I love to look at animals, and I love to study animals and observe them. But even when I go for my walks with Genghis, I always have my scientific coat on, right? I'm always curious and things what I can learn here and there. And then during the pandemic, I really needed to relax and empty my mind. And gardening turned out to be a great way to relax. And for me, in a way to meditate. I'm not good in standing still. I'm not good in meditating that way. But gardening turned out to be a great way to empty my mind, relax, and also feel close to my mom back in Italy, because my mom is an amazing gardener. She really cares about all her plants like there are other children. And I couldn't, as you mentioned, I couldn't go there. So, and I thought I didn't have a green thumb at all, but I started in my rental home, I started to recycle plants. I'm all about recycle. So instead of going and buying plants, also because there was the pandemic and you couldn't go anywhere, I just scavenge whatever was on Nextdoor and Craigslist. You realize how many people give away plants. They are amazing. So we're living in LA. We have not much water here. So I look for succulents and cacti, all the plants that were very water, they didn't need much water at all. And by start planting all these amazing and different plants, I really started to relax, and I felt close to my mom even from far away, and exchanging information about plants. And I thought it was great for me. And it helped me mentally and physically.
I think that's beautiful. And I love the images of your garden and what you were recycling and finding, both in terms of pottery and plants, and how you referred to the platform next door as the Nextorians. It was cute. And that it could be a platform for good and not just ranting, right?
Yeah, exactly. Because at the beginning, to be honest, I was a little bit upset with the Nextorian for the coyotes, because during the pandemic, there was this crazy behavior about coyotes. So the coyotes are going to eat our children. They are all among us, and we have to put Kevlar suit on our Pomeranians. So I was like, I was going out, and I actually never seen one around here. I know they are here on the down the hill from me in Playa Vista, but these animals are as wary of us that we are of them. They became almost nocturnals. They are amazing animals, and I'm completely I feel really bad for people that lost their dogs or their animals on the mouth of a coyote. But at the same time, we need to find a way to cohabitate. We need to find a way to respect each other. Yeah, you know, coyotes were here way before we were in LA. And they deserve our respect. They are amazing animals. And again, we really need to find a way to coexist. And the book is about all different types of animals, but also how these animals are so resilient, adaptable to our urban living, and they live among us, and many times we don't even know that, or we have these fears about these animals that many times are unjustified.
Yeah, I hear you, and I love how you say, you know, we have to find ways to cohabitate and respect each other, because there are so many metaphors there as well for how we can translate that into so many places, whether it's animals or people that, you know, we might not know or understand, but there's opportunity through learning to find ways to respect each other.
Right.
As you were talking about your garden, I wanted to just grab one of the visuals from your book to give everybody a taste, because I just loved this paragraph where you describe it. And you say, I walked outside waiting for the landlord. Your landlord was coming to see your garden for the first time. Little was left of his original backyard. My urban succulent jungle had taken over with a vengeance. Spiky and rough and soft and velvety, gigantic and minuscule, phallic and globose, dark green and light pea toned, sought after and familiar, hip and exotic, toxic and harmless, straight like spaghetti and pleated like kilts. It was a green heaven, at least for me. Oh, that's so beautiful.
Thank you.
What a beautiful visual of your garden. And I love that you approach it like you approach everything in life. You're very much in integrity and consistency, and that how are ways that I can do this sustainably? I don't have to spend money. I can use my creativity. I can repurpose. There is so much being given away at any moment in time. It just takes us being resourceful to find it. Do you have any other tips for people who might be inspired to do some of their own garden repurposing?
I think again, like looking at animals, everybody can do what I did. It's really easy. I have no idea. I didn't know plants much at all, to be honest. You know, I grew up in Italy, so I know a lot of plants there. We don't have so many succulents there like we have here, so I started learning about succulents. But you know, many times you just need a guide, a book, or internet, if you want to use internet, whatever you want, and you can learn pretty much anything by yourself. You know, there, if you don't know things, there are video where you can learn how do I plant this, how much water I need to give to these other plants. So and you don't even need to have a backyard. You know, you can create a little garden even in your home. That's why I really related to people that they are close in their house, or maybe older people that they don't have the possibility to go out. You can have your own little garden in your house, cultivate your plants and observe plants, because plants are very relaxing and extremely interesting to observe as well. And not just animals are interesting, plants are interesting too. They communicate, even if they don't communicate like animals we do. So again, I really think it's so easy to do these things if we just want decide to do them.
Right. It's making a decision, right? And then pursuing that. We have a quiet audience today, but please, everyone, feel free to jump in with either comments or questions in the chat. While you're doing that, I'm going to just continue because you touched on this briefly earlier, this concept of adaptation, and something certainly you've studied as an ocean scientist, right? How animals adapt, and then your observations during this window of the pandemic about how we also adapt. You know, what do you think, what adaptations did you make during this time that you want to hold on to, and what other new learnings evolved for you around how animals adapt?
Well, that's a big question.
I know it is. I know. Just take whatever portion of it you want.
So for me, as I mentioned, I regained the childhood curiosity, and by adapting, I regained the childhood curiosity that I had. It was extremely important because, again, many times we give all these things for granted, right? And the pandemic basically taught us how to slow down and reconsider things. So yeah, the pandemic was a horrible thing in many, many ways. But I tried to get something positive out of it. And yeah, regaining that curiosity, regaining the respect and nature that I always have. But, you know, again, I'm so accustomed to go out and study dolphins out at sea that I never really stop. Everything goes, you know how life works. You know, you just always working, always doing something, and you never stop and think. So the pandemic gave me back that time to think, to reflect, to see what are the important things in life, at least for me. And also the time to write this book and share with others my thought, not only about nature, but about this extreme need that we have to protect nature and how we can do that. And animals, adaptation in animals, they need to adapt constantly to our incessant need of building, of doing everything. And you see this example of adaptation in your backyard. And I can give you a very simple example, lizards. I studied lizards when I was, for my bachelor degree, I studied the home range and homing of species of lizards in Italy. And during the pandemic, I rediscovered lizards. Lizards were in my backyard since I moved here, and I never even noticed them. And sitting, reading in my backyard, I started rediscovering these animals. And I remember reading a paper of a friend of mine who studied the lizards that we found here, the Western Ferns lizard. And in this paper, he was explaining how lizards that live in the cities tend to have shorter and stouter limbs than the ones that live in a more woody environment. And this is an adaptation of this lizard because having shorter legs works better in an urban environment versus woody environment. And also the scales got bigger, the scales on their body got bigger to diminish the evaporative loss. So these are all these micro adaptation that I found so fascinating, and you can see them. So I started looking at this lizard in my backyard and I said, wow, they really have shorter legs.
I love that.
So this is just an example, or
Right.
Before I mentioned the coyotes, how becoming more and more nocturnal. So these animals are unbelievable to adapt to our urban environment and try to live among us. That's why we need to just learn about them and respect them and try to cohabitate.
For sure. And we are going to talk a little bit in a moment about your call to action. First, I want to ask a question that came from Soraya. Very good question here. She is curious about how you started working in different fields, such as science, writing, jewelry making, photography. You know, you are a multifaceted individual and artist. Tell us about how that evolved for you.
I think it evolved gradually. as I mentioned, I spent time with animals since I was a child, so I was always fascinated by nature. I always in love in nature. So because I couldn't go anywhere when I was young, I couldn't go, I wanted to go to Africa to study big charismatic carnivores. Instead, I couldn't, I didn't have enough money, I was too young. So I started looking at the animals again that I have at my disposal. And I think, again, that's something that everybody can do. The artistic part, I think it's, if we can call it art, I just need to use my other side of the brain. So I think making jewelry or drawing, making these sketches I make for the books, for me, and it's really a way to relax my mind. I think we all need that. We need to have hobbies and things that distract us. For me, drawing it's one of the way of making jewelry is one of the way to do this. And again, I can't stand still, so I'm always have to do something.
I love that. I love that. And I think it's an invitation, and it's about, creating that which sings to you, right? And trusting the beauty and the process and the evolution. How you study animals now is probably much different than you studied them 20 years ago. And it's just an ongoing evolution, right?
It is really an evolution, because as I mentioned, I started with lizards, with reptiles, and then from lizards I went up the evolutionary. Actually, I studied sea turtles, they are also reptiles in Mexico, and then I was studying birds for a while, and then I went up and up the evolutionary scale, studying dolphins and whales. So it was really an evolution for me and for the type of animals that I was studying as well.
Well, and another important theme that's that came out in various points in your book, but the example I'm thinking about was in the beginning with I think it was the sea lions, where you talk about the interconnectedness that you also witness amongst the animals and the mammals, and the sea lions brought you to the dolphins that brought you to the whales, right? That it was that journey of interconnectedness and how they engage with each other, and the importance of that for us too as humans. Do you want to touch on that?
Yes, sure. Everything in the world is interconnected, and we sometimes break these linkages without realizing that we need all these animals, from the bees to the wasp to the lizard to the whales and the dolphins. And everything is in a balance, and we tend to unbalance things, and this can create a lot of damage. And you're right, one of the examples that I describe also in the book is the relation between the sea lions and the dolphins, because here in the Santa Monica Bay, I can observe both. I observe different species of dolphins and whales, but also there are a lot of sea lions. And just by recording their behavior and videotaping their behavior, I realized the sea lion tend to follow dolphins. And they really follow them physically, and they spy up to look where they're going when the dolphins speed up and go too fast. And the reason why they do that, I started to investigate, is because dolphins have biosonar, so are better in finding food. So sea lion found pretty much a lazy way to find food by following the dolphins. And then they can feed together. I guess here there is still enough food for both of them to eat. So they really eat together, then birds come too. So you can see, when you see the sea lion, the fish, the sea lions, the dolphin, the seabirds coming, you can see all in once, all these animals working together, feeding together, and you have all these linkages just in front of you.
Oh, that's so beautiful. One of the things you write is nature fills not just our eyes, but our ears and soul, and the human heart longs to embrace it all. And I think that's just such a beautiful summary of when, we see an animal in nature versus in captivity, the difference of that and the importance. And I know that's part of your work too. There are a few questions that I want to get to in the chat, but before I do that, tell me a little bit and tell us a little bit about the importance of biological diversity.
Well, biological diversity is fundamental, not only for other species, but for ours as well. We are losing species right now at a dramatic rate. That's something that I also mentioned toward the end of the book. And sometimes we don't realize how much we need this biodiversity, again, from bees to whales, any animals, and how, more we study these animals also, more we discovered we are not the only conscious species on this planet. We are not only the only intelligent species. And we see this every day. You open, your newspaper, or you look at what's going on in internet, the bee result puzzle, that you have the, My Octopus Teacher, the movie where you look at the what an octopus can do. We are part of nature, and this is again a point that I wanted to make in this book that is really important. We are part of this nature, and we tend to dominate nature, and we really can't do that because we like other species, we are transients,
Right.
but nature will rebound, nature will be around, but we can't live without nature. And I think unfortunately we tend to forget that we really need nature. And the pandemic gave us an example of how nature can rebound if we take ourselves out of the equation. We have species like whales became louder when there were less sheep around during the pandemic. We have animals coming down to the city. In Santiago de Chile, there was a puma. In London, there was a fox walking on the street. So it really, we have a glimpse in how nature can rebound if we take ourselves the equation, or how we can live better in nature. There is a way to do that if we actually want it and we have the willpower to do so.
Well, I think, one of the things that you talk about, and I know that it's a challenging subject and it's a hard one. And sometimes, we're in avoidance, and sometimes it's not, the funnest conversation at the dinner table, but it's a necessary conversation. And I think, for those of you that are interested in perspectives on climate change and the importance of protecting our nature and our environment, Maddalena's book is a beautiful invitation as to the why and the importance. And one of the questions that Joanne had in the chat was for you to share some information about your foundation and the work you do. And if you want to take a moment to share a little bit about that.
Sure. Yes. When I moved from Italy, by now probably you all realize I'm Italian, considering my strong accent. When I moved from Italy to Los Angeles, I was sailing out of Los Angeles with my husband, he's American. And I started seeing all these dolphins and whales. So before somebody asked me how I started, some of the things I started, so I'm, again, being curious by nature. I started looking at who knows what about dolphins and whales. And I realized that nobody ever studied dolphins and whales off Los Angeles, which I thought was kind of bizarre considering all the millions of people that live here. That was the beginning of my PhD, but also with my husband, Charlie, we decided to found the Ocean Conservation Society, not only to do research, but also to do conservation educational programs for the protection of dolphins, whales, and the oceans in general. So that was back in 1996, and we started mostly as a research organization And over time, we became more and more a conservation organization because even as a scientist, I believe that you can do research without having conservation in mind. These animals are facing too many issues, and I can just tell you one they observe here in the bay. These animals have dolphins, bottlenose dolphins have skin diseases and lesions on their body. And these are partially due to difference in temperature, salinity, but also are due to the pollutants that we threw in the water. So we see the effect of our damage even in the body of these animals. And so our research became more and more a conservation effort to protect these animals and also to make people aware of what's going on. So we started balloon aware campaigns to collect balloon in the water, and also to make people aware of the damage the throwing balloons when the balloons, after you have a party, when the balloons end up on the water, how dangerous they can be, or the Be Whale Aware campaign that explain how it's great to go out and see dolphins and whales at sea, and I'm all for it. But when you do that, you really need to respect this animal space and without going too close. There are guidelines. And even here off Los Angeles, I saw people with boat going really close to these animals, dangerously close, and can be dangerous for them and can be dangerous even for you, because at times they can capsize boats as well. So yeah, we started more and more program for the protection of these animals and to raise awareness about the dangers they are facing.
I really appreciate you sharing that. I think the balloon awareness campaign and understanding that there is no, in my opinion, positive side to purchasing and using balloons ever, because of where they can end up. It's just something that we should just not ever do.
Yeah, there are so many alternatives that you can use that you don't really...
There's so many other ways you can celebrate without a balloon, right? And also here in Washington, we're getting ready to pass some legislation really holding boaters accountable for distancing from the orcas, and the importance of, you know, not getting close to the animals and giving them their space. I mean, how fearful must it be for animals in the water at times, right? And then Natalia put up a link not only to Maddalena's book, but to her nonprofit. And what I would say is Maddalena and her partner Charlie and dog Genghis have dedicated so much time. And Maddalena is here today as a volunteer, sharing her time and her knowledge with us. And you know, whether it's 5 or 50 or 500 that you can donate, it would mean the world to me if people on the call today would donate and also share this link, because she is doing such great work. So please consider that. And the link is also in the chat. We do have a question from Richard. And Richard, please help me clarify if I need to, but you're asking Maddalena if you write in your head or create more when you are spending time in nature.
If I'm not sorry, I missed the question.
Do you find you write in your head or create more when you are spending time in nature? Is there a correlation with that?
Yes, I think I do. Yeah, I do both. I think when I'm out in nature, I create, I discover things continuously, not only about animals, but sometimes I come out even with ideas about the things I can do with my jewelry that is nature inspired. So I think it's pretty much it's what's going on all the time in my mind when I go out and spend time in nature. I'm I can't stop my brain to work. Sometimes I would like to stop, and that's when I garden. That's when my brain kind of stop. That's my meditation time.
So help me, if there's somebody out there who like cares about nature, cares about climate, but feels hopeless, like other than recycling and composting and sustainable purchasing and use, like what other recommendations do you have for people to shift from times of hopelessness to, you know, being a champion for hope and change?
No, you're right. You know, apathy is something that it's really common these days, especially when we go through this uncertain time. We tend to, you know, push everything away from us. And you're also right with climate change, you know, that we talk about climate change, it's these big things that everybody said, what can I do? What can I do? There is nothing I can do. And we do tend to, as you mentioned, you know, recycle or go vegan or click a button online thinking to make a difference. But what I trying to say with the book and also with what I do with the Ocean Conservation Society is that you need to go farther than that. Awareness, unfortunately, is not enough. This is a time of action, and the action is not so much recycling. My action is to do really to do more. And I think my point in the book is observing nature bring you to better understand nature bring you to respect nature bring you to do something to help nature. And I think one person can do much, but all together we can do a lot. So one of the things that I explain in the book is to try to involve other people. If you are passionate about the animals around you, nature around you, you should involve other people. This is what I say to children in school, or to teachers, just involve them in a program. They can all work together, like eliminate styrofoam, eliminate plastic in your school, and then go to other school. Don't stop. And for people, it's the same. In your neighborhood, if you have an environmental issue, involve other people to try to resolve it, to go to your representative. Only by working together, I think we can hope for greener leaders. They can change things. You know, one example is Greta Thunberg in Europe. She was one person, but what she did was she tried to involve more and more people, and then she became a movement. And if we had more Greta Thunberg in the world, we can do more. So I do what I can based on my knowledge, based on what I know what to do. But I think anyone can use its own skill to do something. Whatever you do in your life, I'm sure there is a way you can help nature based on what you know, or how you can be involved with other people. But again, don't stop at pushing a button on your computer. Get out, involve other people, get out your comfort zone. And I think that's something, if we all do that, I think we have hope. I think there is still hope if we do something.
Well, and one of the things you say is people talk about reconnecting to nature as though we could ever disconnect from it. I was like, right. Oh, it's so true. And also about, you know, you fight for the things you love. And so the more we spend time and love and appreciate nature and animals and the gifts of nature on a daily basis, the more connection and passion and advocacy that will spring from that. And you're right, you never know when one person or one action can turn into a movement. I love that.
Right.
Any other questions from the audience? And while we're waiting for those, Maddalena, is there anything I didn't ask today that you would like to share or offer in closing?
Well, I will love if people can read this book. The reason is exactly what we said at the end, because I truly hope that by reading the book, everybody can appreciate the nature that is at your fingertips. It's really around you. And I really believe then if you appreciate what's around you, you're more willing to do something for the protection of the environment. And at the end, it's and that's all I care about, conserving and preserving the species that are around us, and we are part of this wonderful nature. And also, you mentioned something about us being captive and looking at this animal free out on the ocean or near us. And during the pandemic, something that I remember is how many of these animals are still in captivity, especially animals like dolphins. They are incredible, and we shouldn't keep them in captivity. And that's something that I'm also advocating, because I don't think with everything we know now about this species, there is no reason to do so at all. So I'm a strong advocate for not keeping animals in captivity. And I think during the pandemic, we all had a little idea of what being captivity means. And so maybe we can better understand how other non-human animals can feel.
Thank you for reminding me of that correlation of being in captivity and why that's not important, or why that is so important, and it's not appropriate for us to keep animals in captivity. Laura Lee wrote, "Walking barefoot is a great rooting to the earth." I agree. And if anyone else wants to share their tips for connecting with nature, we would love to hear that. Joan, thank you. And Salma, thank you for purchasing Maddalena's book. Joan also asked, going back to the dolphin skin diseases, how is that treated?
Unfortunately, is not treated. The only hope is they will go away with time, and if we stop polluting the waters. We follow the skin diseases over time. Sometimes we see dolphins that we know because we take picture of the dorsal fin that work as a human fingerprint. They can tell us the identity of every individual in a pod of dolphins. So we recognize some of the same individuals. Sometimes we see that these skin diseases tend to go away. But there is nothing we can do right now to treat it. And in some area, like the Indian River Lagoon in Florida, these animals have what is called lobomycosis. It's a really kind of gross disease. They look like they have cauliflowers on their body, and they're completely covered by this. And this is due to the pollutants in this water. There are studies to see if there is a possibility to do something, but right now I think the best hope is to stop polluting our waters, and I'm sure the dolphins will do better.
Thank you, Maddalena. Thank you. Such amazing and beautiful work you're doing. And again, I loved your book. I loved your book. I loved it visually. I loved the flow. I loved how all of the chapters just were the right size nuggets of invitation and curiosity and reflection. And I just really appreciate you being, brave enough to put all those thoughts on paper. It's not easy writing and sharing the written work. So congratulations on another book. You're the author of many. Thank you for being here today and sharing your observations. This recording will be sent out to all, as well as an email with links to Maddalena's book and her nonprofit. And we wish you continued success and time back on the water and time with family and Charlie and Genghis, and just your beautiful inside and out. And I appreciate you so much. Thank you, Maddalena.